you guys are ready to start, I'm ready to start.
Let's go.
Okay. So thank you all three of you for joining us for our Reading Area GIS Users Group meeting, pre-recorded in advance because you all are not in the same time zone as we are, and 5:30 to 7 our time would be not a very convenient time for you guys to join us live. So really appreciate your time. You guys know me. I'm Naomi Yates. I'm the Reading Area GIS Users Group Coordinator. I've been doing that since about, I guess, 2021. I got my GIS certificate at Shasta College with the GIS certificate program there. And since then, I've worked at Caltrans District 2, doing a student internship there. And then just last September, I started with Spatial Focus. Colleen and Kristen work for Spatial Focus, and Michael Mazonik works for the town of Cary Stormwater GIS. So that you've heard a little bit about my background. Now, Michael and Colleen and Kristen, if you could each introduce yourselves and give us kind of an overview of your GIS background, kind of how you got to where you are now and where you are now. Except we'll start with Kristen because she's here on my screen.
Hi everyone, my name is Kristen Young. I'm working for Spatial Focus to do contracted work for Michael Mazonik, and I got my start in GIS when I was in college. I had a geography as one of my majors and a minor in GIS. And from there, I went on to work for a federal government contractor where I did a wide variety of federal contracting work, including cleared work. And I left that to come work for the city of Raleigh in North Carolina, doing municipal government work. And I then left that when I had 2 children, and now am working with Spatial Focus to do work for the town of Cary.
And how long were you in each of those different parts of your career path?
Sure. So when I left college, I went into work for federal government contracting for about 8 years. And then I worked for the city of Raleigh for 5. And now I've been doing this work with Spatial Focus for about 1.5 years now. So almost 2 years. So 2 years this summer. So right. Kind of it's my career has evolved with my different phases of life and different paces of life, and children versus no children, married, single. So it's been really great to have something that I'm interested in, like GIS, that has so many different opportunities that really allow for me to be able to continue to do the work that I love at a pace in a place that works with my current phase of life. Right. So right now, Spatial Focus and the town of Cary have been very flexible with me as I've been navigating 2 young children, and I really appreciate that. But it's made it possible for me to stay in the industry, in the field, while still being able to do what I love and be a mom at the same time. So
what you love and the other thing that you love.
Yep, exactly.
Great. Thanks, Kristen. Michael, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Michael Mazonik. I am a stormwater project manager here at the town of Cary. I've got a Bachelor of Science in Horticultural Science with a minor in landscape architecture, even though that's not official, but most of a good 30% of my classes were in design school for landscape architecture at North Carolina State University.
Your deep interest in plants.
Exactly.
You've talked a lot about plants. I did not realize that. That's cool.
Yep. And after school, I was self-employed for a while, but I realized that I was not cut out for self-employment. And then from there, I gained employment with a remodeling company and eventually worked as a project manager for them in the residential area. And then in 2008, through the recession hit really hard here in construction, and decided that it was time to reinvent myself. And my good friend from school, she suggested that I look into this thing called GIS. And I'm like, what is that? And the more I read about it, the more I was like, wow, this is really interesting. So I enrolled at NC State again in their master's program and got accepted. It was right when that program got started, and gained my graduate certificate. And I was about to become full-time as a master's student, and I had a TA. They offered me a TA position. Things were really looking great. And then all of a sudden I got a job offer at the city of Raleigh. And I decided I needed the money because I had been unemployed for a while. So I took that job, and then that segued into a GIS position in their utility department. So when I first started in GIS, I really thought I'd go into more of the planning area with my degree. But the utility position came open, and I found myself really intrigued by that because that kind of segues right into asset management and into some of all the things I had been learning from the construction background. So that really worked out well. And worked at the city of Raleigh for 5 years. And then an opportunity came here at the town of Cary. It was pretty much a lateral move, but the opportunities here with the person that hired me was a very much of interest. He was a surveyor and an engineer, and it was just the interview went really well. I asked him just as hard of questions as he asked me, and I just really worked out well. And from there, I went from working as a technician to becoming the utility GIS coordinator, and made that position. That position had never been here at the town. And then about 2 years ago, another opportunity arose as a project manager in stormwater, where that's the official title, but it's a little bit different. Most project management positions here at the town are strictly in building outdoor projects of some sort. This one we have morphed into being more of data management and GIS with the traditional project management, mostly floodplain studies that we have happening here at the town. So from there, we've been trying to really update our stormwater data, and as we'll get into in a bit. We went into really modifying the schema, trying to build apps and different things to be able to track some of our projects and inspections for some of our stormwater permitting.
Okay, thank you very much. And last, Colleen Sharp.
Hi, everybody. My name's Colleen Sharp, and I have been doing this a pretty long time. I'm afraid to go back as far as you all went. I graduated from East Carolina University here in North Carolina with a degree in urban and regional planning and a minor in geography. I managed to get through college I took one college computer course. As far as I was concerned, I was going to grow up at the time and have a secretary, and there was no reason for me to know how to type or use a computer. So I did not have any of those skills when I graduated from college. I was lucky I got a job with the city of Raleigh, North Carolina. Pretty much, I did a year or two as a drafter. I worked for a company and I did drafting, old pen and ink drafting, not CAD. Pen and ink. And then I got my job at the city of Raleigh as a planning technician, doing economic development. And so I started out doing planning, and one of the first things they had us do was figure out not fully used land in a portion of the city. And so I started asking all kinds of questions about data and those kinds of things. And there was, at the time, a mainframe and a computer program that had very limited information. And I would go to the woman that was doing that and say, can you tell me all the land in Raleigh that's vacant, or that's zoned this, that's greater than 10 acres, and those kinds of things. And finally, she got tired of me asking questions, so she showed me how to do Boolean queries. and do those kinds of things myself. So introduction to computers, started working on that, and she left and went to Wake County to start the GIS program at Wake County. And I moved up into her position and got invited within the first couple of weeks of being in that position to one of the very first meetings that the county had about bringing GIS technology to Raleigh and Wake County. And we formed a partnership. This was the very early 1990s. We formed a partnership and have built the GIS program for Raleigh and Wake County together, collaboratively. And so I worked for the city of Raleigh my 30 years. I didn't go anywhere else. I got my 30 years in at the city of Raleigh. And when word got out that I was thinking of retiring, the public utilities director happened to come to me and say, well, I don't know if you want to work after you retire, but if you do, we would like to have you come and help our GIS program. And at that point, I felt that the GIS program in the utilities department was the weakest of all of the ones, and felt kind of badly about that. I hadn't had the success that I thought that we should have compared to other departments. And so it gave me a lifeline. You know, I could retire, and I immediately got work back. So I waited and I went to work. I met Michael, started helping public utilities at that point build their program. And then at the same time started working with, Spatial Focus while I was at Raleigh, and I was the GIS manager at Raleigh. I left that part out. I was the GIS manager at Raleigh. I hired Spatial Focus to help us build a master address repository database. And so I was working with them, and they asked me after a couple years to come work for them. So that's how I got to Spatial Focus, the 30 years plus, and then,
Right.
Hey, come help us. So for me, it's been a very eye-opening experience to be in Spatial Focus, because like I said, I had 30 years. I could tell you an awful lot about Raleigh and Wake County, but I didn't know much about outside of Raleigh and Wake County in North Carolina. So the experience of being a consultant has kind of broadened my horizons and seen a little bit more. And working with public utilities, I got the experience with utilities, because up to that point, my forte had been the planning. I had done an awful lot in Raleigh with planning and development and permitting systems and those kinds of things. So the last 10 years I've spent I've been retired now from the city of Raleigh 10 years. So I've been at this and spending much more time with addressing and utilities since I retired.
Right.
So Cary, we're currently about 177,000. At least that's what Google is telling me here, but give or take. But in the 1970s, it was about 15 or 20,000. So it has grown like
Wow.
I mean, just crazy. Even
What's
in the
driven
time.
that growth?
Research Triangle Park, I would say, is a what is the best way to describe Research Triangle Park? It's a blue collar executive technology,
industrial technology hub,
yeah.
And now it's also got a lot of the biotech, the
Yes.
medical. There's and it's because of the three universities, North Carolina State, Duke, and the University of North Carolina are all three. That's the triangle. When they talk about the triangle, those three towns, and it's between all three of them. So it's using a lot of the research capabilities, and IBM came in 1958, 59 or something. It was the first big one that came and brought lots of people.
And so stormwater, there were really no stormwater plans. A lot of things were put in the ground. And bear in mind, a lot of this is also before any type of NPDES permitting and all of that kind of legislation. So the downtown areas were unknown. So in from my knowledge, is from 2000 to 2010, there was a number of contracts for with some consulting firms to do, and I'll put this in quotes, surveying the stormwater pipes. When I got here, GIS was still in map info, if anybody knows what that is. I sure didn't when I got here. Luckily, they were moving to Esri, and that was part of the reason the job that I took here came available. Was my boss knew there was some need, and so a big part of my job in the beginning was just transforming data from map info into Esri. And at the time, again, there wasn't a lot of really good use of GIS. I know my boss, who was a utility engineer, he was using the map info data for his water models as best as possible. And I mean best as possible, which was difficult for him because it wasn't in great shape. But since then, the utility side has vastly increased their modeling with it, and on the stormwater side as well. My boss, Billy, who's been here now 10 years, is probably one of the best stormwater engineers in the area. He has been pushing a concept of basin modeling. And so we're going around basin to basin and modeling our basin, where the GIS, of course, is directly part of that whole modeling process. So us updating our schema, going back through all of the old surveys. So Colleen and I spent many, many months of going back. We found the old survey data from 2000 to 2010, and we reintegrated that into the new schema, which was a labor of something.
I don't know. I'm not going to say love.
Love was coming to my mind, but I was like, no, that's not it.
It was a lot of hard work.
So it was. There were days where I was like, okay, I just got to get out of here for a minute. But yeah, but I forget what the numbers were, but we did some quick statistics on how much data we were able to find and pull over, and we did a lot better than what I expected. I thought we would be at a 60% level, but in some cases we were at 95. So that was really good. Yep. We're now fully vested in Esri technology. We are currently, though, working on getting out of ArcMap and getting into Pro. So for basic stuff, we're all pretty much in Pro now, but for our stormwater editing and utility editing, where a lot of our automatic attribution, including our unique ID generators, we're all heavily in ArcMap, and we're currently working with folks to build some of those attribute roles to get transitioned over into ArcPro before it just quits working.
Before the big day.
Yes. This month it went to mature support.
Yeah, we had a celebration of life here in town for
Yeah, I mean, the main difference is those attribute rules and the network, the geometric network to trace network to utility network transitions are the major hurdles for that transition.
Yes,
but things are in place while the workflow currently is in ArcMap. Things are in place to transition that workflow to ArcPro, is what you're saying.
We're working on that. That's correct.
Right.
Yep. We've uncovered some new hurdles.
Of course you have.
like we found out that even going just to trace network, you still have to have portal in place. So that was didn't know that.
Guess we got
money.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, but that's okay though, because we have needed portal for a while, which is probably something we will be talking about here shortly, and some of the things that we've done to to offset not having Portal. Building some of Kristen's built some of our scripts for us to have a hosted stormwater network layer so that we can do joins with our Survey 123 data and show our inspection accomplishments. So if we had Portal, we that would have worked very easily, but not having Portal, figuring out that method of having that hosted layer was paramount. And we've been able to show some good successes with that.
Great. So Colleen, could you give us a brief description of Spatial Focus? You told us a little bit about them, but then maybe the other GIS work that they've done, the other things that you're doing with them at the moment.
Yeah,
just kind of give us an idea of who they are.
Yep. Spatial Focus is a small woman-owned company that started in the late 90s. Martha Wells and Sarah Yerman started the company, and their primary goal was to put food on their tables. They had some things going on personally, but they also wanted to do work that they found interesting. And so they kind of looked for what they found interesting, and they found addressing to be of very much interest. And so Spatial Focus has spent a considerable amount of time and resources helping people with addressing related data. Now we do other GIS related projects, but in the time that I have known them the most, I've known Martha and Sarah. We were all prior GIS users of a company that went out of business back in the late 90s. So I knew them from user group meetings way back then. But since I've known them and worked with them the most, it's the focus is mostly on address related databases. Sarah and Martha were two of the authors of the federal I can't ever get the FGDC addressing standard, Federal Geographic Data Committee addressing standard. They are two of the authors. They worked with over 500 communities to build that standard, and from there they did addressing workshops. Martha has been a long time addressing workshop instructor, and so as a company, they're very involved with URISA, the organization URISA for professional development. Currently, I am working with clients in Massachusetts and Georgia and North Carolina on addressing related projects, in addition to assisting Michael with utility work, where we are building authoritative address databases. And that's a lot of fun. We did that in Raleigh and Wake County. That's how I first met Kristen at the city of Raleigh. I went back and they had me come back and help her with some stuff. She got everything out of my brain, which was kind of nice. But as a company, we're very small. We have a new client. We're getting ready to start a project. I think it's going to be interesting. I'm not intimately involved, but we are going to be doing addressing for the U.S. Virgin Islands. That's a big contract. The U.S. Virgin Islands does not have addressing on all of the islands, and there are still issues as a result of the Hurricane Maria several years ago. And funding through those grants is what's going forward. We are also working with the state of New Mexico, doing some addressing workshops and addressing training and helping them develop manuals and guides. So it's a very eclectic company, like I said, mostly related to addressing, but Sarah is phenomenal. The other thing that Spatial Focus does is we use open source software for almost everything we do, and then we translate it back over or convert it to Esri. So Sarah has also been an instructor for many years in open source technologies at the URISA and other national organization levels. So
yeah, I went to her workshop. It was phenomenal. It was really good.
Yeah, and I think that's how we found out about Naomi, is at the URISA conference, and I heard about this wonderful young woman who did a great presentation and might be interested in some work. So tag, you're it. So yeah, I think as a company, it's mostly addressing, but we can do all kinds of GIS work and have really delved into the utility stuff with Michael.
Right,
Working
right.
with Michael.
Great. Now, we kind of already covered how spatial focus got connected with the town of Cary, but maybe, Michael, you could give us more details about what exactly the purpose of the collaboration is between the town of Cary and spatial focus with regard to stormwater.
Sure. And it might be easier to go back even a little bit further, because there's been some great things that have happened that I think would be great to talk about for a second. So when I came to the town of Cary, I mentioned that the GIS was not functioning as well as it could. And about that time, about 6 months after I was here, I reached out to Colleen to see if Spatial Focus was interested in doing like some workshops with different departments and just talking about GIS. And so they were, and we put together it was about 4 days or 3 days, something like that.
Multiple days.
And we met with Public Works. We met with the 2 engineering groups that were here. And then there was like a technical bulletin that was written afterwards by Spatial Focus, giving some further thoughts on GIS and some recommendations on improving items. And so that worked out really well. My boss was very pleased with it at the time. Some of the things got integrated, other things didn't. At the time, also, the town manager was fairly new here. He started about 6 months before I did, and he was rearranging departments quite a bit. So there was a lot of upheaval going on at the same time. So it was hard to keep up with all of that as well. But from there, there was a contract that had already gone out that was hired by a consultant to look at the stormwater schema, and this was in 2018, and it went okay, but it didn't really hit the mark that Billy, my boss, was looking for in stormwater. And then there was and that contract was going to go through stormwater, water, sewer, and reclaimed. But the person that was in the now utilities, which used to be water resources, and water resources was all of kind of utilities data and stormwater data. So about that time, that's where things split apart, where the stormwater division, where I am now, went under the town manager's office, and utilities went under the utility department, which is
child.
Which manages, yes. And utilities manages plants and does design on the pipes, but Public Works actually maintains and does the maintenance on the pipes. So there's a little bit of oddness there. Yes, because coming from Raleigh, when I first got here, I was very confused by all that. But anyways, going back, so the person then that was in utilities, that was managing the contract, decided not to use that same company, and decided to put out the RFP for that, or as RFQ, and Spatial Focus applied for that, for doing the schema updates for utilities at that point. And so they won that contract, and Colleen, my boss at the time, and myself worked through that pretty much through COVID. And we're finalizing that in the end of 2021 or 2022. But that's about the time I moved into stormwater and began working for Billy. And of course, Billy was not happy with that first round. And we went ahead and tackled stormwater all over again, which was a difficult time to figure out, because what we learned was that stormwater data is not sewer data, just period, exclamation point, all the above. It is just not the same thing. While I've kind of known that the time I've been here, but going through that at a intellectual level, so to speak, and talking through all the parameters, it was some difficult discussions to the point where people, it was just like we had to stop talking because everybody had a different interpretation, and so we really tried to hone that down. And I feel like we've done a pretty good job for a system that is sometimes open, sometimes closed, and it can go back and forth throughout where that raindrop is going down the hill. And so now with hindsight, is there some improvements? Absolutely. I can see some things I wish we had done, but all in all, it is a pretty good schema for stormwater, at least as compared to what I've seen with some other municipalities.
And I would add, and this goes into the next question, so this sort of leads to the next question, is Michael is underselling the amount of work that it took. He did say that we worked through COVID. He and his boss at the time and I, every single Wednesday morning or afternoon, I don't remember, for an hour or two, we went through every single column and every single feature class in the water, sewer, and reclaimed databases. And then we turned around and did the exact same thing when Billy chose to do it with stormwater, Michael, and we did the same thing with stormwater. We met every single week for multiple hours going through column by column to figure out. And I think what Michael's alluding to is there are things that neither one of he nor I were very familiar with stormwater. So we knew what our typical questions to follow up with and the things, but there were certain pieces of infrastructure and things that we just had to take the word of the person that was telling us. And then, as he said, there were conversations where one person said one thing and one person said another, and then we were trying to decipher what did all that mean and how does that lead to your domains. And a lot of it was your domain values and what is this? And what we have found is there were some things where we didn't quite understand, or, now that we're looking, they were saying we absolutely have to have this column in here. And we're now realizing that may be a redundant column because it's actually called something else. And, so there's certain things like that we would go back and tweak, but I don't want to undersell the amount of time that we spent on that, because we spent a lot of time on stormwater itself. I think we started in February and we finished in October or November. And so that's a weekly meeting, except for every once in a while when there was a vacation or somewhere along the way or a holiday. But and that was hours. And when we would come up with the draft schemas, and everybody would look at the schemas and the domain value. So there is a lot of back and forth and collaboration if you're going to tackle something like that. And it doesn't matter whether it's water or sewer or reclaimed or parks or planning, whatever it is. Yeah. That's the lesson I've learned after all these years, is if you spend the time up front to get your database model correct or as close to correct as possible, you have a lot less work in the long term. So anybody that's saying, oh, we got to get there, the planning effort and time is well worth time and money spent, because in the long run, it's going to pay off. And that's where we are with this. We've gotten to the point where we have a schema. we did, before Kristen came along, we had another fellow that was helping us, and we had all of the data that had originally been in the map info world and had been converted by some original consultants that just did some mass conversions from generic map info into generic Esri water sewer feature classes. So then we took all of that data and put it into the new schemas. And then Michael said we took the old surveys, and we did. We found a couple ways. Michael found a couple ways to improve the quality of the data through automatic processes. Like we have something called the pipe IO, which is the point that represents the end of each pipe. That wasn't something we had before, I don't believe. And
No.
Michael found a way to do some analysis with GIS and figure out that these are all pipes and they should have a point on either end. And so once we figured that out, then we were able to run these processes and add this data. So and then Kristen came along at the right time, and there was a bunch of pictures of all these assets. So the first thing Kristen did was write some programs and some code to take the pictures and create the links and move the pictures into folders and create links that we can now all use. So it's been an ongoing step-by-step process to build and rebuild to get to where we are now. And so now we have a workflow that as Michael mentioned it before, as-built are the holy grail when it comes to underground assets. And that is supposed to be what you get from surveyors that tells you exactly what went in the ground. And I'm using some of the words that I'm using on purpose because we all know from what we've done, and I'm married to someone that was in the utility business for the city of Raleigh for 30 years. We don't always we get something that's stamped as built, but it may not be exactly what's in the ground. But that's what we have. So we are relying on as-built. And one of the things that I will say that we worked on first, the first thing that we worked on in all of the schema work was the data quality and the data accuracy, because Michael was really, really keen on making sure that someone could come back later and look at each piece of data and determine how accurate or how what's the quality. So we have a lot of columns that talk about the accuracy. Is it a level class A or class AA accuracy survey? And, all of that kind of survey information is to help with future research or whatever. But we spent a lot of time on that because it was very important to be able to know that. And what we're finding is we're getting as-built that may not have a surveyor certificate on it. So we don't know, is it class A or class B? So we don't know the positional accuracy, but we do know that we have the material and the size. So, it's based on the different kind of assets and attributes, what information that you're collecting. But the workflow is to get an as-built, and I'm going to skip all the workflow that gets to the point where we get an as-built. But there is an as-built that an editor has to work with. And one of the first things we do is we have to geocode that. Hopefully they gave us survey points. They didn't give us survey points. We have to figure out multiple ways to geocode, but we get the plan. We put in the survey points, you connect the dots. And that seems like the easiest part. Although researching and getting all the paperwork and finding all the answers is actually the most difficult part of our workflow, is finding all of the information we need to be able to start adding the points and the lines and the attributes for those points and lines.
Colleen, that goes back to the data integrity too. That's why we need to do the research to find all that information, because that data integrity from the beginning, having as much as we can, as good as we can, is what is best for the future of the data.
Yeah. And we do spend an awful lot of time doing that. But I think in the long run, when other people want to look for it, they can say, where did this information come from? Oh, it came from a class AA survey, and it was done on such and such a date. That person can feel like that's a pretty good representation. I've heard over the years, as long as you get it in the width of a backhoe. That's what was always told me, so when they go to dig, they don't dig it, but you definitely want it as accurate as you can get, because a backhoe, really, what is that? It's not the most accurate. So once we have that data, we go ahead and put it in. We do have a QC process where the different editors are getting to a point and we QC it, and then we go ahead and Michael has there's polygons that represent every project. So we know when the projects came in, we know where we have access to the Laserfiche and the other files of where everything is. And then we put a final date in there that says this is when this project was finished. And so then on all of our tracking dashboards and web information, it shows up as being completed. So that's a very, very quick overview of our workflow. But Kristen has got a lovely dashboard that she's done that helps all of us keep track of what we've done.
Okay, so this is the dashboard, the Stormwater Project Status Dashboard that I put together. And this is where we're able to visualize those numbers that Michael was talking about in a fourth dimension over time, right? So you can see the polygons on here, and all the different colors are projects. Think of a project maybe as a development in a lot of cases. And you're able to filter the assets and the asset numbers and the projects by date ranges. So when Michael was just referencing the miles of gravity mains that were added last year, for instance, you can just select last year and it will update all this data. So this is really helpful for gauging how much work has been done in terms of how many assets have been added to the network over a period of time. So this year so far, we've added 10 miles. Last year, we added 56 total. So that's pretty cool. We're on a pretty good roll so far. But yeah, it's nifty to be able to filter the asset information down here and then visualize the projects that were completed last year, this year, and so on. And then to see specifically what projects are in progress, either they're being edited or QC'd at this time, and then to see all the ones that we've done. And Michael had added that bit of information about the 2018 timeline and how no projects have been digitized since that 2018 year. So here we've actually separated it out to show record plans digitized from all times or from during that period of time where nothing was done. So you can see here, this is this year. So this year alone, we've already done 22 projects. We probably should add somewhere where we can see how many projects we've done all times. But yeah, that's so the ability to look at projects that are recently completed, in progress. The map is interactive, so you can zoom in and out, and you can click on projects and get information about them. And they have links to different bits of information that can be helpful, such as the record plan link that Michael was just talking about, those as-builts and Colleen during the workflow. So that's where we kind of can click and navigate to that information. We can see graphs of gravity mains and the inlets, things like that. We can add pretty much any graph we want that will filter on the assets. I know the particular interest is really in the linear feet of gravity mains or miles of gravity mains and the inlets that are added. I think that is really, those numbers are the fascinating ones. So you can see like by month, January, February, March. Yeah, it's a pretty cool, pretty interactive dashboard, especially when you're looking for project progress.
Right. Great. Thank you so much. And if you have a moment before you leave, you did touch on this a bit in your intro, but how is being a geospatial consultant, Kristen, how has it impacted your life professionally and personally?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I talked a little bit about it when we introduced ourselves, but I left the city of Raleigh for many reasons, but one of the primary reasons was that I had a daughter who was about 1.5, and I wanted to be a mom. You know, when I was younger, I thought I'd be that mom that threw my kid in daycare and school and whatever. Once I became a mom, that was not the kind of mom that I wanted to be. You know, I became a mom during COVID. I had my daughter. I was 3 months pregnant with my daughter when COVID hit, and I had her at the peak of COVID. And so we were home. You know, my husband and me, her, we were all home working remotely, watching her grow up. And so from a very early time when a lot of people would put their kids in daycare or have babysitters come, I was home with my kid working. Like, she was next to me, she was babbling away in a playpen, and I was working. And it was such a cool thing to be able to be here for her life and be able to work and do my work. You know, and it made me realize that I didn't want to miss out on all those things and all that time and all those firsts. And I wanted to be there for her physically, emotionally. So doing this work consultant wise has really been helpful for me, because it allows me to do the work on the time that I have. Like right now, I'm getting ready to leave to go to soccer for my daughter, but I can stick a meeting in between picking up my husband from the airport and soccer. Like it allows me to kind of fit it into my life just right, how I need it to. You know, it affords me the little extra income that I need from not working full time. It allows me to work as many or as few hours as I can put forth in a week, but still be there for gymnastics and swimming and all the activities. And now that I have another one in the mix too, you know, all the diaper changes and the bottle feeds and whatever it may be. It's really, the flexibility afforded by it is really beautiful, and greatly appreciated. So
Yes.
I would also think, but maybe this is just me, that it is a good way to keep your skills up.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean,
you know,
it's so another question I think we'll touch on towards the end is certifications and things like that. What can you do to really help yourself in this industry? And I do have my GISP certification, and I also have my PMP certification. And if I wasn't doing GIS right now, and if I instead took a bunch of years off, those certifications would lapse. I wouldn't be able to keep my skills up. I wouldn't continue to network and meet people and really stay in tune with the current technology that GIS offers, which, you know, like I touched on earlier, is ever changing and evolving. We have the latest and greatest all the time. It's quite amazing and really cool. But this has really afforded me the ability to stay in touch with all of that, to keep in touch with the people, go to the conferences still, all sorts of things like that, that I otherwise would just be completely, I mean, I'd be in mom world otherwise and doing some other, you know, this is one of a few businesses that I have, and this is something that really allows me to stay in touch with GIS. As opposed to just the other, you know, off. There's an off switch otherwise. So
right.
It's
and I
pretty
would
cool.
say on the flip side too, it's enabled Spatial Focus and the town of Cary to avail themselves of your skills, which are phenomenal, and that those assets haven't been cut off from the work world too, which is greatly appreciated in the reverse as well.
Yeah, so. Thank you. Yeah. I really enjoy what I do, so I'm really glad to be able to keep doing it and not have to take a break from it just to, you know, I can still prioritize, but I can prioritize with all of the options still present. Right. So I can put my family first, but still also keep the work that I love.
So we kind of covered actually just now with Kristen a little bit of how you two, the two of you, have achieved a really effective teamwork strategy between among the Spatial Focus team members and between the town of Cary and Spatial Focus, because we have meetings every week digitally, just like this, to talk, but you know, I'm here in California, you guys are out there in North Carolina. Colleen, sometimes you've been in Colorado, and so it could be very easy, and I've never actually been in the same place as any of you, but I feel like I know you, and I feel like I'm a part of the team, and so I kind of wanted you guys to talk about how you have made that happen.
I think we all try to be real with one another.
Mhm.
That's the first thing, and understanding of each other's needs. But I feel like it's also just I think we naturally get along well. And I think I told you that, you know, meeting Colleen, it was really in the past. I think I told you this, it was really through dumb luck, where when I was at Raleigh and I got a GIS position, that was about the same time I heard Colleen was retiring, and I was like, oh, what bad timing. Just what terrible timing, because I had heard such good things about her in grad school, and so I was really looking forward to meeting her and getting to know her. And then all of a sudden she's sitting next to me because they hired her. And I was like, oh, maybe this isn't such bad timing. But of course I was asking her all kinds of dumb questions. So she'd always look at me like, what is this guy talking about?
That is not true. That is not true.
Well, I was in the beginning of my career there,
Mhm.
in GIS for sure. But it was all good conversations. So I feel like that Colleen and I had gotten to know each other, and we knew how we each operated, our strengths and weaknesses. And then, as we talked about, we went through some grueling, long conversations. That the one thing that we probably need to add to that as well is that is also very important, is not only were we talking to folks, like it wasn't just my boss, Colleen, and me. We would invite public works folks into those conversations and hearing their needs. So it was some very long conversations, just to understand what other people's needs are. So it wasn't a siloed kind of data building. Um, and that I think is very important.
I think the other part for me that I have always tried to do, and it's not, you can't do this with everybody, right? But I think that relationships it's really important, like Michael said, and that is a first step with doing anything with anybody and having any kind of success. I mean, I just felt like with Raleigh and Wake County, I met the two people and we built this relationship between the city and the county, and then we were able to have success. And so for me, like Michael said, he and I kind of knew each other, and when he called and asked, and Spatial Focus, does do strategic plans and implementation plans. And that was one thing that Martha and Sarah had done a lot of, and I had done myself at the city of Raleigh multiple times. And so I was like, yeah, that's something we can do. And in the process, learned an awful lot about utilities. But
Right.
My goal in working with anybody, and has been since I was a supervisor, is to try and make sure that people are comfortable in the work that they're doing, and that you put them in a place and try and help them succeed. And that I've always felt like that was my job, is to try and make everybody else successful. And then that would help me be successful as a manager.
Right.
So it's
Right.
more about everybody else. So what is it going to take to make Michael successful? Because for this project to be successful, Michael has to be successful. So what is that for Michael? Well, for Michael, it's an accurate and good, complete data set that they don't have. So how do we get there? It's making sure that I have people on board that can help do that. And I feel like we just got really lucky at the right time with different people. There was a young man that was helping us at first, and he was great. Unfortunately, he had a health problem all of a sudden. So, then we got lucky with Kristen, and then I feel like we've gotten very lucky with you. And there's another young man that, you mentioned Kyle. Kyle's never on the meetings with us during the day, but he works at night. And I think he feels like he's part of it because we try as much as possible when he's available, but he's working mostly in the evenings and weekends. So it's trying to put together it's trying to put together a team of people that have the skill set that we need, but that also are interested. And you know, I don't know what else you might have to add, Michael, but I feel like the other part about spatial focus is spatial focus has primarily been a virtual company. I've never been in a meeting with, well, I can't say that. Back in 2013, I was in a meeting where all 5 of the people were in the same room at the same time.
Did you take a picture?
No, we didn't. But so we were already, all of our meetings were already online every week, you know, and then so what the pandemic did is I think the pandemic made everybody else realize, hey, this is a working model that you can be successful. Because as Michael said, at first we were meeting, you know, the first year or so, I think when we were doing utilities, we were in a conference room meeting on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden the pandemic came along and then everything went to this. And so me, instead of driving 45 minutes to the other side of the town from where I live to Cary, you know, so an hour and a half on the road every day, that hour and a half was typing up the minutes as soon as we got done. And so it made the whole use of time much more effective.
Yes.
And, you know, I told Michael recently, I might want to go to lunch with him soon because the last time Michael was the last person that I had an in-person meeting with, and it was in March of 2020, like 3 days before everything shut down, you know? So I think what we've all learned is that this virtual, you can build relationships virtually and you can still be very successful virtually. And I don't know if there's really anything else other to our success than trying real hard to keep people in touch. And, you know, there is benefit in chit chat. And we do it. We do our chit chat, you know, and we know a little bit about each other's personally, you know, and that's the office cooler talk that I think people miss. So, you know, I think that is a real important part of building a team is that we do know each other. We know a little bit because we do take that time to care about each other in that way. And I think that's real important too.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Especially for people like myself who are the person who's never been in the same room with any of you. You guys all have met each other in person. I have not, but I've felt supported. You've even given me advice about my GISP and all of these things that gone the extra mile for me. So I've appreciated that and then felt in response like I'm committed to the team work because I feel like a part of the team. Do either of you, could you share maybe any advice you have? So in our Reading Area GIS users group, we consist of students and professionals. So there's people who are just starting their investigations of GIS. Maybe they're students at the local community college coming to the meeting because they get extra credit for it. Maybe there's people who are going back into a second field, you know, reinventing themselves, like Michael was saying. Who have professional experience but in a different field and they're sort of growing. And then we have people who've been doing this for 20 and 30 years who are in. So given that there's such a range of people, is there any advice you would want to give to people in GIS?
You go first.
I'll say something. I'm not sure it's perfect, but I want to say because there's so many things, but and maybe we could just keep tag team each other, Colleen.
Okay.
Never stop learning. I have found GIS to be it's always changing. It's not like carpentry or something where you learn how to do an angle and this and that, and it's the same thing. GIS is always changing, and reserve a time to be able to continue learning, because I know that is something I struggle with, where just there's always deadlines, and while I reserve a time, that usually then becomes the time I catch up on things. And it's hard to find that time to read that blog or something.
Or listen to a podcast.
Yep. So I'd say that's the first thing that comes to my mind with that question.
And off of that, I would say, like you said, schedule that time. One of the things I learned from our city manager, Michael's heard this before. One of the things I learned from our city manager, we figured out that he was coming up to visit us on Fridays. One of the young ladies that worked with me kind of figured out that the only time we really saw him in our office was on a Friday. And one day she asked him, and it was always coming up with special little projects. And don't tell anybody, I'm working on this one. So we knew he was coming up to us to do these special little projects. And she asked him about Fridays, and he said, Fridays is the one day I do not allow my calendar to have any meetings on it. And at that moment, I said, well, if the city manager can do that, I can do that. So I blocked my calendar off on Fridays. And you had to be really special to even allow me to schedule a meeting on Fridays, because that was towards Michael's goal. That was my day that I could sit, and from his perspective, that was the day he worked on his projects. And he said, that's the day I sit and think. So, it was like, make sure that you have time for yourself to, as Michael said, you could be trying out how to do that new blog, read that blog and try and figure out how to do that new task in GIS, or that's the time to really tackle, how do I go through and do this data? For me, it was a day, I spent a lot of time on data on Fridays because I'm a data nerd and I love getting in there with the data and playing with it. And that was my day to get in the back end of Oracle and just go nuts and have fun. But that was also my chance, because the other thing is you don't want to have everybody else waiting on you to get something done. So me as a manager, that was my day to clean my plate and then push everything back to everybody else that had pushed stuff to me. So having a time dedicated to yourself, I think, is real important. From GIS, Kristen talked on it. It's changing so fast. You have to keep up with it. Right. I have done a terrible job keeping up with it in the 10 years, but the other part for me is I kind of moved into this in a time frame where I was the manager. So what I'm doing now, and Michael's heard me say this as well, I have thoroughly enjoyed this project because I never edited. I wasn't an editor. I went straight to management, and that's not always a good step. But that's just the way I shouldn't say that, because early GIS, I was one of the few people that was building it, but we moved on. But being able, I just, I'm going off on a tangent. I just feel like that's a really important thing to be able to, I lost that train of thought.
Do the work. Do the actual editing work itself.
Yeah, and it's just been fun to actually get back to the beginnings of GIS and learn how to edit and appreciate all of that work that everybody else does, the grunt work. There is value in grunt work. I guess that's the other thing. So I would not, if you have an opportunity to get an internships, that's grunt work. For those of us in local government, the internships are to get the people to help us do what we can't get done, and to also be able to help you. Take advantage of anything that comes your way. That would be the other thing that I would, if it's, you have a chance to go work for Coca-Cola to do something with their GIS, that might be very fascinating. I don't know. I leave yourself open. Leave yourself open to opportunities. That would be, it's something I told kids growing up, leave yourself open to opportunities.
Right.
Let's see what else. GIS is, like Kristen said, it's become such a big tent now. It really is. There's so many paths you can take.
So many facets, yes.
Yep.
I mean, do you want to be a programmer? And do you want to be a programmer, or do you want to? There are some people, and Michael and I know them, that are just perfectly happy being editors. They don't want to aspire to be management. They don't want to. This is a great job if that's what you want. The low stress, be able to do that. But then there's also paths that you can take. Do I want to be more of a programmer? Do I like that? I had a young woman that worked with me for one time, and the first time she started programming, I gave her a couple weeks and, gave her the outline of what she needed to do. And I came and I said, what do you think? Do you like this? And she said, it's just like a math problem where you know the answer and you have to figure out how to solve it. So for her, programming she loved it because it was something that like worked in her brain and she got it.
Right.
Other people, they look at it and they can't figure it out. Right.
Right.
But they might be great editors, or they might be beautiful with the visual and the art part. So
Exactly.
find the way to get them into the art part of GIS. It's all there. I think there's opportunities in all kinds of facets of it.
Right. Right. So
yeah, I'm looking at your question again real quick. The certification and the I think those things have become important. At first, again, my age, and time in here. At first, some of us is that really our certifications for GIS important, and are they necessary? And I think over time we've all seen that is, and it shows a level for me as a hiring supervisor. It showed me a level of competence. So if you have gotten and reached that level, I think it helps. So anything that you can do like that, it's more like Michael said, keep learning, and your learning is going to continue. But remember to me, the hardest part of all of that is the paperwork and keeping up. So my other advice was, if you're going to do that, make sure you keep the copies of those certificates they give you at the end of class. Or I guess they probably send them to you now in email. But, all of those things you need to keep. And sometimes we don't think about it until it's time to make the application for something. So, that's
so
all really.
Keeping your portfolio up to date, keeping your resume up to date, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, is all very important.
At the same time, one thing I would also say was, even if there is something that you're shooting for and it has certifications and this and that, but you can do it and you've got the experience, don't be afraid to do it. As an example, Stormwater Project Manager. This was traditionally a PE only position. And it was that way for sure in 2017. And I'm probably the first non-PE in Stormwater Project Management. So I think that's also important. But at the same time, if you get into that position or you're trying to get in those positions, just keep working towards getting those certifications, because they do look good to a hiring person.
Right. Great. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.